Welcome to Chalk and Code.
Where the science of learning meets modern technology.
We're bringing together entrepreneurs, product leaders, researchers, and advocates
to spark ideas, challenge assumptions, and shape the future of learning. Welcome to Chalk and Code, where we explore new and novel directions in education, technology, and leadership. Today's guest is Doug Roberts, founder and CEO of the Institute of Education Innovation. Doug holds degrees from Princeton University and Harvard's Graduate School of Education, and he began his career as a public high school teacher. It's social studies, right?
Yeah.
Where he saw firsthand the challenges related to implementing EdTech products in the classroom in ways that met the needs of students and teachers alike. After that, Doug transitioned, as I understand it, into EdTech consulting and business development leadership at EdTech organizations like Lightsail Education and InGrade. And more recently has been focused on the mission of IEI, the Institute for Education Innovation, a national organization dedicated to bridging the gap between K-12 school district leaders and EdTech innovators, where he's been recognized for his ability to help superintendents and technology companies work together to drive measurable impact in public education. Doug, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Theron. Good to be here.
It is a delight. So you began your journey as a social studies teacher. How long were you in the classroom, and then what did you see there that got you so hooked on EdTech and its implementation?
Yeah, I think EdTech kind of hooked me, but I taught for a few years, about 3 years total. I actually really liked it, but I am not a patient person. And unlike my wife, who is still a classroom teacher, for me, I felt, I had ideas, I had ambition around leadership. I thought I had aptitude for leadership. And, my journey into public education was always about trying to, bring new ideas and energy and look for a better way. And which is why, I studied policy I did the teaching program, but I also had a policy angle to my master's because I wanted to sort of understand the decision-making processes in public school systems. And that learning is with me in very obvious ways, and much more so in what I do now than when I was teaching high school social studies. But it was a calling for me. But yeah, I started to realize that if I was going to go become an administrator, I'd have to sort of, especially back in the ancient 2000s, I'd have to work my way up through the system or go charter, right? If I, wanted to have that broader impact. I thought I had more to give, and just so happened that a friend of a friend was starting what was really one of the early online tutoring companies. Funny to think that was happening in the year 2000, but voice over IP had been invented. And I was living out west San Francisco, and this guy had invented a way for tutors and students to work together, and needed help writing lesson plans and training teachers. So it was a great way to step into that world. And that company got acquired very quickly by tutor.com after I got there. And so then I was introduced to the whole industry and found my way to, there was a boss who just said, you'd be really good at business partnerships and, working with districts. So I did a bunch of work doing like account management and training and customer success. And then somebody finally said, you'd be a really good sales guy. And so I spent a bunch of time leading sales efforts. I really spent the most of my time as an employee was with the company now called Amplify. We were then called Wireless Generation. So there's a crew of us who are all out there kind of doing cool stuff still in EdTech. And I was there for like 5 years and saw that I was somebody out kind of on the fuzzy front end of its new initiatives. And it got me talking to a lot of superintendents in states, where we didn't really have a presence and where we didn't necessarily have a funding stream, where I had to go find one. So I learned a lot about the business by taking a startup company into new states. And I also learned a lot about how great it can be to keep your frequent flyer miles with one airline. All stuff that's, just all of this was like a new world for me. And, my parents were both first generation college, like they were teachers. The idea of, working for a tech company and traveling around the country was at the time, very interesting and alluring, and people kept promoting me to do more stuff and be a boss. And, there off we went. So, but yeah, it's funny. I do miss the work of teaching. I love what I do now. So I'm glad I was able to find a way, ironically, to become a teacher of superintendents in a way. I'm not a former superintendent, so I'm not sitting here saying I know how to do it my way. But my job now is to marshal resources to help, create learning experiences for some of the best superintendents in the country. And so in a way, I'm still at it with curriculum design and, writing essential questions and making sure that the people I serve, are able to learn and know certain things by the end of some time together.
It's a unique perspective to go from teaching frontline into the EdTech market and trying to, and from there, trying to help. The way I heard it explained one time from a VP of sales was he's not really there to sell you anything. He's there to help you buy. And his perspective was, kind of informed by figuring out how to satisfy the need that they had most of all. So given your roles as both educator on the front line and experience there and with business development and EdTech, I wondered where you first saw the gap between district needs and the implementation.
You know what it was? It was a couple of things. I have a couple one of my favorite anecdotes from being a sales leader in an ed tech company was, this was not early in our journey on ed tech. I was visiting a district, I won't tell you which one, and I told the assistant in the office, what do you need for the presentation? I said, I just need just a projector and a screen. And so I showed up to the district office and it was an overhead projector. And this was like, 2010. And so I was like, that's interesting. There are still districts out there for whom a projector is that. And right, like that was just one individual, but so there's somewhat of a disconnect, but I often found, especially in my early sales career, there were two kinds of district leaders I'd encounter. Those who just automatically assumed I was there to rip them off and get rich off the backs of, taxpayers and students, and those who really wanted to dig in and like learn more and figure out a way to apply whatever we were working on to their students and find a better way. Right. And so, it's that second group that interested me and made me think that it's surprising we don't have more like that. And maybe it's because we're just kind of not great at buying and selling in K-12 the way, I would say we always use medical stuff, but like, I guess we're pretty good at buying and selling automobiles to consumers. I think, hospitals and medical practices have become pretty good at buying and selling prescription drugs. There's a process. And look, it's a little different when you're dealing with public officials, taxpayer dollars, but that doesn't mean we can't try to be better at buying and selling. And, in fact, I'm even saying the word buying and selling, that was like taboo when I first started my career, right? Districts, but that's the thing. No taxpayer's mad at a district for installing a new HVAC system that's going to keep the air clean and keep kids comfortable while they're in school, right? They don't think of it like, how dare you talk to sales reps and buy an HVAC system? They go, I want my kids to be comfortable and safe at school. I want them to breathe clean air and be comfortable temperature wise. So, right. Yet if you're going to have my kid, go on a screen and learn mathematics from a supplemental tool that interacts with their learning needs, that is somehow, like something we have to be afraid of. And I had a lot of sales meetings where you could tell the people in the room who were just not having it. They just thought this new technology was all a scam and trying to kind of make money off of school districts. And instead of saying, these people are trying to build something, and yes, if just like our HVAC company and our school bus company, they're going to make money on the thing that they've built if it's successful. And if it's a fit for us, we're going to buy it. And if it's not, we're not. And we don't have to be mad about it. And so that whole journey led me to, well, what if I take it? I started to work with more and more startup companies, which is why sometimes I think we're like, what is this guy talking about? Whether it was the end grade learning management system that was pulling metadata about content into a system where you could plan lessons, whether it was the stuff we were doing with assessment at Amplify early on. Like, these are all, back then we were doing Palm Pilot stuff. I worked at a company called EduSoft that was like the first to do plain paper bubble sheet scanning, and now bubble sheets don't exist anymore, right? So, but all of these things were, it can be a little scary because they're new. And I guess I started to build a community of district leaders who just sort of wanted to always know about the new stuff. And then that turned into, it seemed that I was able to be successful in helping these companies build relationships with school districts because I had relationships with the people. And so, a great mentor of mine is the late Dr. Walter Ampray, who was superintendent in Baltimore County and Baltimore City. He just taught me early on in my sales career, look, he's a retired superintendent who helped us, be better at working with districts. He said, people buy from people. And that led me to start to go out and try to take, instead of, calling people and emailing people, let's go to an event and let's try to build as many relationships as possible. And then finding that there was something missing. There are a lot of really great events in our space, but there wasn't one that tried to fix the buying and selling process. And specifically, what I heard from all the superintendents I talked to when I started IEI, they wanted choice and agency when they met with partners. They didn't want to, the whole like timeshare model where you got to go on the trip. Sorry, you got to take the meeting if you want to go on the trip. You got to sit through the sales presentation. Then you get to go to Orlando for a couple of days. Like that's an old school model, much like timeshares. And I had a lot of superintendents telling me what I really want is a self-directed process where I can hear everybody who's at the event and I can then go decide who I meet with. And I want to sit with them for not a long amount of time. It's like, I can't take long meetings, but like give me 20, 30 minutes to understand what this is and figure out, since I chose to be here, let's figure out if it's a fit. Likewise, I heard from partners, we go to these things and it seems like everyone's there for the trip and they don't necessarily want to sit and talk to us. And so we walk away and we don't get enough sales. And, or we get told that like, we're here just to get feedback, but yes, we all want feedback, but for the cost of going to one of these events, you need more than feedback. And so I built what is essentially a relationship building engine down to like, we have tech. Our tech is like basically I would call it a rudimentary in terms of UI app, but it is a dating app. I mean, it has the same concept.
App, you say?
Yeah, it's built around an algorithm that I wrote based on companies and superintendents trying to figure out if they want to do work together. And that has increased engagement rates between our member districts and our partners. It has increased ROI on the dollar spent for events. We built the whole thing around that. But then the thing that I didn't anticipate that would happen is that sort of it became like a community. I started with a hashtag when we first got launched, hashtag IEI family. And my concept that I said to everybody who came to the first one is, look, we don't get to choose our families. We love our families, but sometimes we need a family-like support system in the difficult jobs. And so this is a work family that we can choose. And that has sort of stuck with people. And that sort of affinity for each other, for the process of our work, and for the kinds of events we host, that also leads to better buyer seller interactions between district leaders. And so, back home in the district, nobody wants to think their superintendent is off on a junket. And, if you're going to something where you have to sit through sales meetings just to get a vacation, that's one thing. If you're going to something where you're learning a ton of stuff, you're connecting with colleagues who can help you solve problems, and you get to spend your precious time out of office talking to providers who are actually aligned to your strategic plan and your budget, that is a win every time. And so that's the thing I went to build. And I had great superintendents working with me as unofficial advisors and mentors, and 3 who actually partnered with me to build this thing. And I think that's why we've had good results.
Doug, let's roll back just for the listeners. You kind of transitioned into the conversation about IEI. And I was curious if you put some context around IEI, what it is, what its core mission is.
Oh yeah.
How it plays, matchmaker. I love the idea of it being you're developing a dating app between districts and vendors. How did you get to that point? And then actually build it?
I spent several years sort of workshopping this in smaller contexts. So I'd find a place for superintendents were getting together and where I had a good network, and we'd put together a luncheon. And then we transitioned to, let's do an overnight. Let's do as you're finishing up your state conference, how about you all stick around and we'll throw dinner. We'll have a good time. We'll do some meetings. And so through that process, so that became sort of an arm of my consulting shop. And through that process, I discovered that really it needed something more comprehensive, intentional. And that's when I started thinking, let's go and spin this out into its own entity, its own association. And so we are a membership model think tank of school superintendents who typically like to be the early adopters, the go-getters, the leaders amongst peers. They're the award winner. We've had a couple of ASA presidents and lots of state superintendents of the year in the group. They're folks who are curious, who like to get out and learn, who want to expand beyond their state and find peers that they can connect with and learn from, birds of a feather, if you will. And so we host 3 national summits a year, bringing together industry leaders and superintendents. We have some deputy superintendents who come and represent their districts with the superintendent's blessing. We host some regional events in places where we have a lot of sort of a deeper network. We host a deputy superintendent, we call it the District Leader Connect event that has sort of a dual purpose. Deputy supes get to have an IEI experience and a leadership development experience. And our member superintendents get to gain experience as coaches and mentors. So they can sort of work on a presentation that they're doing at home with their cabinet, or work on some coaching work that they're doing. So we have tried to be really intentional about outreach to up and coming leaders to help pay forward all the mentorship that we've received to be in this position and help the next generation. Because we all know we've got a crisis of leadership in public education. We've got highest turnover we've ever had in these leadership jobs in public school districts. So we want to make sure that we reach out and help somebody think about their next step and be here to support them and coach them. Some of the kind of unofficial stuff we do is, because we're a community, a network, a couple times a year, I'll get a text or phone call, usually a text. Hey, I'm going through something. I'd love to talk to some people. We don't meet for another month. And so what I do is I just throw up the bat signal and we get a Zoom together the next morning. And so somebody can get, 7, 8, 9 colleagues, and they may or may not know each other, but the person could just sit there and go, here's what's going on. I've got a board member doing this. I've got an initiative in the community to do this. One of the things we've been dealing with lately is mascots. Like mandates to change mascots because they reference Native Americans in a negative way or something. Like that's a really big challenge that like other members of our community have ideas for helping. And so that connectivity between in-person meetings is really important. And then last thing we do is we just, we're an association, a club. We had at the big national conferences, we usually have a gathering for our folks to help each other connect and say hi and have a hug or a handshake or whatever.
So you're actually creating a network that goes beyond IEI. You're creating an additional social and professional network between the superintendents and the deputy superintendents, even as they go out into other areas or on in their careers.
But also, what I didn't realize would happen is that creating us as sort of the voice of district leadership back into the rooms where companies get started, investment in EdTech gets made, and where companies figure out their strategy. So we've partnered with ASU GSV, with South by Southwest, with BET, and then this year for the first time with the Nordic EdTech Summit. I'm going out to Stockholm. The Penn GSE Catalyst. So we'll be at Holland IQ's New York conference. We're sponsoring the third place prize in the Penn GSE Catalyst startup competition. So we bring our expertise. Sometimes we bring a cadre of soups with us to do coaching work. Sometimes it's just a couple folks, but we believe that by reaching into those rooms and talking to those groups of whether they're startups or investors or whatever, if we help them think better about how to work with school districts, they're going to build better solutions. We're going to have better tools at our hands to help kids achieve outcomes, right? It's not about, and this idea started because at an IAI at some point, somebody said something like, how do these companies get built? Like, how do they get started? Where do they get their money? I was like, I don't know. Let's go talk to people who give them money and help them learn more about us and how we buy.
I saw that you have, this was a really, I thought, novel approach. You have a soups tank, which sounds like...
So that's part of that. So Shark Tank.
Right. So describe that for me.
We're hosting an event. Yeah. So we've done the Soups Choice Awards now for 4 years. Soups Choice Awards are given out by our members to, people in our group. Like we have an award named after Dwight Jones, the great retired superintendent of Clark County and former state chief of Colorado, for courageous leadership. We have one named after Hank Grishman, who was superintendent for 47 years. We think maybe the longest serving ever, for longevity of leadership. So we have a process. We give out awards, but then we spend part of that event. This is at our fall summit, which this year is November 9th in New Mexico. We spend part of that event bringing in the next generation of partners. So I'm always looking for ways to create avenues for companies to get access to the wisdom of this group, but also, one of the biggest reasons why EdTech startups don't necessarily make it is that they never get a shot at a pilot. And so, there are people out there with all kinds of good ideas. I've got superintendents who want to hear the good ideas, help craft them, and maybe help implement them as long as it's going to be a productive use of time and funds for their district. So the soup tanks are Shark Tank panels where startup companies come and pitch. So, you can put us alongside the other startup pitch competitions, ASU GSV Cup, the South by Southwest one, I forget its name, Penn GSE Catalyst. We're like that. We're the only one that is judged entirely by superintendents. The rest of them are all judged by industry experts, investors. So we want to have one we want to be the one that's the superintendent one. So if you're winning all 4 of those, that's great. But if you're winning ours, that is a direct path to districts going, oh, a bunch of superintendents said you were the best startup of the year. That's pretty cool. We chose 5 last year, and those 5 companies have all gone on to start to win real pilots in districts, and a couple of those have expanded those pilots to district wide. So we're just trying to help good people find each other and do good work together.
So what are the characteristics of the winners? What from the standpoint of the superintendents, what makes a winning product?
So, we purposely don't tell them what that should be. We want each of them to bring their own criteria to the conversation and then, vote accordingly. But I'll say that the companies that won last year all share, first of all, they're kind of ready to go. They're ready to actually do work in a school or a district. They've got product that someone can actually use. They're ready to go on like roster integration. That's sort of a key, and all necessary safety protocols. But beyond that, they're solving a problem that districts actually have. They're probably most importantly listening and focusing on building the relationship with the leaders, and the teachers that use it. Not necessarily the ones that don't do as well are the ones who think they can solve all the problems, or the ones who over-engineer something around their ideas, versus it's much better to show up and say, we've kind of figured these 3 things out. We could figure out these other 3. We're not sure. What do you think? And then go do that work in partnership with the district. The ones who show an interest in a relationship and a partnership and listening, that tends to be almost as important as the problem solution fit.
So after someone has won and gone on to successful pilots or whatever, have you made any conclusions about what they need to have done to have an impact on teaching and learning? Because they've been successful acquiring the business or getting in as a pilot. They have the right characteristics, but now there's that other piece.
You got to be sticky. You got to become furniture, right? I talked earlier about like HVAC. No one's ever going to say we don't want HVAC in our school, or at least heat, depending on what climate you're in. Right? No one's ever going to say we don't want to transport kids on vehicles that look like buses. But if what you're doing is effective, I think, especially with an early stage company, or even a company that's new to the district that's piloting, I'm not sure that all products need to show some sort of statistically valid gain on NAEP scores, right? I mean, that's not, first of all, it takes too long to figure that out. But with stuff that's new, teacher response, districts trust their teachers. Teachers say, look, this is helping my kids. I can tell you that it's helped this one with this and this one with this. You get a lot of that. I get frustrated when our industry tries to make it seem like everything has to be, an efficacy study. There has to be like an N and a standard deviation and all that researchy stuff. Like, that's fine for academia. The folks I work with, they're like, look, my teachers love this thing and they see that it's having an impact and they see kids smiling while using it. And they think they can use it to help, close a gap or help one kid do a little better on a literacy concept or whatever it is. That's going to earn you the district wide. And then, once they're spending bigger bucks and going district wide, then someone's going to say, we've got to see the impact in our system with this thing. And if it doesn't, then they'll give you a runway of a couple of years. Renewal rates are quite high in EdTech because I think districts want to see things through. But, it starts with this sort of gut check and do people use this and find it useful?
So based on all that you've seen and the connections that you're helping people make, and the products that you're seeing go into districts and what you're seeing coming at districts and vendors in terms of technology, what do you think are the trends that they're going to be facing that maybe they're not thinking about? Some we can all see, AI, but what about the ones that they're not necessarily thinking about yet?
Well, so it's interesting. So right now, I was just putting together my presentation for our group, for our summer summit. You have an interesting phenomenon. You have venture capital completely drying up relative to 2 years ago in EdTech. There was a big pandemic rush with ESSER funding and all that. And so investors are holding back on new investments a lot and sort of holding on to the things they've invested in and waiting for them to show progress and success. So there's a slowdown in new companies being formed, new portions being built. Yet, I think it's Ed Week Market Brief had a piece about how districts' appetite for new EdTech solutions continues to grow. So I think the trend kind of is that, a lot of us on the industry side, we look at the companies getting started. We go to ASU GSV, we hear about all the new companies. but there's such a gap between starting and getting exposure to all the districts. And so that all those companies that got formed 3 years ago and that massive, burst of new activity they probably still haven't engaged with 99% of the districts out there. And districts are, they're reading about AI, they're reading about, how tech's being implemented, and they're saying we need more EdTech tools. Now, we have a funding problem, as we all know, which is a little concerning, but especially with the federal government, but that's not slowing the appetite. So I think you're going to see, because we have a funding problem, both, reduction in federal funding plus inflation, and inflation hits school districts everywhere, around fuel oil and rising health insurance premiums for their employees. You're going to start to see districts look at, what are we spending money on? What are people using? What's having an impact? And, if we're going to satisfy the appetite for new solutions, for better solutions, we're going to have to probably cut some. And so that's not always easy for a district to do. But I think that's a trend we might see while we've got a hold on new companies. And, that'll separate some of the real ones from the pretenders. I think, the big thing around AI, that trend is for teachers, like anything that looks like it's replacing a teacher is DOA. But something that is the way to think about it is, I'm going to use AI to give teachers more time to visit with kids. If you can help a teacher spend more time individualizing instruction and building relationships with kids, the relationships with kids has more impact than any tool will ever have. So if AI can help a teacher very quickly do some of the more mundane minutia of the job, then that's more time with kids. Same with administrators, right? Administrators, in some study I saw, they spend, particularly district level administrators, they spend a lot of time communicating with school level staff and coaching and mentoring and, and talking through problems and all that, right? That's sort of their role. And if AI can take time off of operational tasks, and give them more time to spend time working together, that could be a great win. So there's a lot of widget type things coming out with AI. And I think the message you want to give is like, how does the AI increase that time that people spend working together?
Do you think that there's a reluctance to use or to accept AI among teachers as a way to understand their students better? In other words, to feed a lot of information into the AI and get the equivalent of a profile or additional insights. Is there a data privacy concern that they're worried about?
There's data privacy. There are a lot of teachers out there who think screens are just not good at all, right? That you've got, where I live in New York, the legislature just banned cell phones during school, across the board. A kid cannot use a phone in school. So anything that's going to happen with the internet has to happen on a school device. Not the worst thing in the world, I guess, but we'll see how it plays out. And also a lot of people associate AI with ChatGPT and ChatGPT with plagiarism. And so particularly among your secondary teachers, there's just a lot of kind of well-found fear that kids are just going to use this thing to cheat. And, so AI has a bit of a PR work to do with probably teachers. But and it does tend to break down, like the sort of more digital native ones probably figure out ways to implement, our superintendents, I can tell you in our group, are trying to stay way ahead of it and like make sure they're on the cutting edge of everything. So we can't have a set, no matter like the theme of our gathering next week is about, reclaiming the narrative and branding, but like there's got to be an AI component to it, or else, what are we doing? Like they want to get better at it, and it's very hard to spend time researching AI tools when you've got 20,000 kids that you're responsible for every day.
Right. Is there advice that you would give the superintendents and the vendors that you're working for? You mentioned promotion, and kind of implied in that was education. But is there like, if you could give them one particular piece of advice around the use of AI and how to handle it, what would you say?
I would say, look for inefficiencies and in anything that you're doing, and try to find some sort of AI thing that can remove those inefficiencies, which is, I think, the same thing everybody is saying. But I was talking about my wife when I think about teachers. Like, I don't think she considers, and if she listens to this, she probably won't. If she listens to this, she will chuckle. She doesn't consider her paper planner an inefficiency. I see it and go, like, I didn't know they still made those, right? Even in 2001, 1999, when I was teaching, I was doing everything in Word documents at the time, right? She and I are just different people that way. But is there a way, can she find a way for AI to do something with her lesson planning? She probably will. She's still going to write it in that book, and that's her choice. But people but I think anything, it's hard to think about. It's hard for particularly classroom teachers to think about their work in terms of productivity and efficiency. That's not how most teachers are wired. They're wired to see kids react and smile and engage and connect, and then try to go in for that and get the kid to grow in reading progress. That's how they're wired. And so I think districts have to be mindful of that and be respectful of, some of the fear that teachers are going to have, or disdain that teachers are going to have, particularly our English teachers, for AI. And, try to lead the horse to water, or just come up with solutions that are really about time savings. And all teachers will tell you, if they have more time with kids, they can get more magic done.
Super. Doug, I'd like to wrap us up. First off, thank you for spending your time with us. This has been really wonderful. If our listeners wanted to connect with you, how would they find you? Where would you want them to go?
Yeah, LinkedIn. So LinkedIn, you can find me pretty easy. Doug Roberts, IEI is my thing after the slash. Obviously the IEI LinkedIn page, www.ieik12.com. We've also got our own podcast called Stories from the Field, the Superintendent podcast, where we talk with sitting and aspiring superintendents about some of their leadership challenges. We just revived the podcast this past year and did a season this spring. We're still releasing episodes now that talks about mentorship and how important it is to kind of pay that forward, and pretty considering our leadership shortage. So yeah, you can find that wherever you find podcasts. And unfortunately for everybody, despite me having a face for radio, it's now a video podcast, and we're doing all the stuff. So we're pretty easy to find and pretty easy to connect with.
Super. Well, for our listeners, thanks for listening to the conversation that we've been having with Doug Roberts today, where we explored the lessons that we can learn from his journey from the classroom into educational technology and his unique point of view, and importantly, about the Institute for Education Innovation's efforts to connect vendors and district leaders in ways that lead to better outcomes for kids. We hope that today's conversation sparks some new insight or some idea that you can pursue. And if it did, share the podcast episode with a colleague and join us here next time on Chalk and Code. Thank you, Doug.
Thank you, Theron.
Thanks for tuning in. If today's conversation sparked new insights or challenged your thinking, we'd love to hear from you.
Visit flexion.us for more information and join us here next time on Chalk and Code.